The Kings look to build on their best win of the season, and it's a Kings fan feedback Friday on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years with Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, it is a Kings fan feedback Friday. We'll be getting to your emails from the past week in just a moment. Comments on the Kings suffering their most embarrassing loss of the season, a 4-2 defeat in San Jose to, at the time, the worst team in the NHL, the Sharks. And the very next night, posting the biggest win of the season for the LA Kings, a 6-3 victory at home over the Vegas Golden Knights, the top team in the Pacific Division. It's right back to work for the Kings coming up this Saturday afternoon as they host the Chicago Blackhawks. And just a quick little preview of that game. And my biggest question going into that game will be, will the Kings build off that great performance against the Vegas Golden Knights, or will they once again fall back into old habits? Will we see them play with heart? Will we see them play smarts and execute on a high level as we did against Vegas, or will they play down to their competition and not play and build off that win? Kings check in with a 6-3-2 record going into that matchup against Chicago. The Kings are a perfect 3-0 at home so far. LA sits in second place in the Pacific Division, heading into that game against the Blackhawks, 1 point behind Vegas for first place. Chicago enters the game 3-7-1. They're coming off a 3-2 loss in San Jose to the Sharks, and that means that Chicago is now currently the worst team in the NHL. Because of the Sharks win over the Blackhawks, the Sharks have slightly overtaken them, but Chicago right now, going into that game against the Kings, have the worst record in the NHL. Checking the matchup by the numbers, Kings check in 14th in the NHL in average goals per game at 3.27. Chicago is 26th in the league at 2.64. Kings are 19th in the NHL in allowing goals per game, 3.27. Blackhawks are 16th in the league, 3.27 as well. You've got the Kings on the power play, 24th in the league at 15.4%. Blackhawks are 17th in the league, 19.4%, and the Kings are 19th in the league on the penalty kill, 76.1%. Chicago 22nd in the league on the PK at 75%. Obviously, the Kings were very much up for the game against the Golden Knights, hosting the top team in the division and coming off their worst game of the year. Now, they can't fall into the trap of taking on another bad team and play the way they need to play the way they did against Vegas. It doesn't matter who the competition is. And I understand it. It's easy to get up for a big game against a big team. But in the end, it's really more about how the Kings play, not necessarily who they're playing. You don't want to be unrealistic about understanding, hey, there's a good team coming into our building. We really got to be ready to go. Oh, and this team's in last place. They're not very good. It doesn't matter. You still got to be ready to go. I would certainly think, and I believe the loss to the Sharks is going to be a reminder for a while for the Kings that they have to play up to a certain level. It doesn't matter who the competition is. You can lose if you're not ready to go. So the Kings, with that Sharks loss in mind, I think will take on the Blackhawks and have the lesson learned, but we shall see. We won't know until they actually take the ice and take care of business, but hoping to see the Kings build off that win against Vegas. Do not take a step back. Keep going forward. It is a Kings Fan Feedback Friday, so let's get into your emails, and we're going to read them in the order in which they were received. Some of them might be edited a little bit for time, and we'll say, as you probably know, people like to react to things that displease them. When you driving on the highway and you see those signs on the back of a truck says, "How am I driving?" Very rarely does anyone call that number to say, "Man, that guy is driving so he's safe. He's at a reasonable speed. Great job by that guy." It's always right. You're always complaining, right? So with that in mind, we'll get into the emails for this week. And our first one comes from Brandon, and he is in Lake Arrowhead. And he says, "Where's the top six? Vacation? Great to see the scoring from the Turcotte line and even a goal from Akil on the fourth line. Why hasn't he played more? I love that the defense is getting on board too, but we stand no chance of keeping up with good playoff teams and making a playoff run if we don't get scoring from our top six. Where does Hiller go from here?" And again, that was Brandon in Lake Arrowhead. Well, things obviously look a little bit better after the Vegas game. You got a big game from Andre Kopitar. Adrian Kempe played real well. Kevin Fiala chipped in with a power play goal. Certainly worth noting that the Kings did go 4 games without a goal from any of their regular top 6 forwards. That said, I think they're going to be okay. We'll see how Turcotte ends up doing on the top line. One guy I am a little bit concerned about is Trevor Moore, just 1 goal and 2 assists in 11 games. Everyone else that has played regularly in the top 9 has more points than Trevor Moore. And he just doesn't seem to be getting many opportunities. I'd like to see him have more of a shot mentality to try and get one and get going. I would say Trevor Moore and Quentin Byfield are probably the 2 guys that need a goal here sooner rather than later to get it going. But I mean, look, I pointed it out, and it was worth pointing out that the Kings weren't getting a lot from their top 6. But again, hopefully the Vegas game gets them going. I'm not overly concerned about it, but it was, as you pointed out, Brandon, it was worth noting that the top 2 lines were not really doing a lot offensively recently. Our next email comes from Frank in Burbank. And a significant part of Frank's email was criticizing Jim Hiller for benching Kevin Fiala against the Sharks. And at the time, I don't think Frank realized that it was because Fiala missed a team meeting. It wasn't because of what happened in the previous game against Utah, where Fiala got benched for taking a couple penalties. So he had taken Jim Hiller to task. I thought it was an overreaction to bench Fiala. So I don't believe that Frank knew about the missing of the team meeting. So I decided not to include that part of his email. I think Frank will probably be okay with that. But he says, Kings fan for over 30 years. I've been listening to your podcast for the last 3 seasons. I appreciate what you do. Your unbiased opinions when it comes to the Kings, management, and players. This is my first email to the show, probably not the last. I hope not. Thank you for taking the time. That being said, let's get into it. I was disappointed with almost every move the Kings have made over the last 2 years or so, from the lack of free agency to trades to make the team better, and especially the coaching staff. I've never been impressed by Hiller. He seems like a lazy and affordable choice for head coach. I, too, was hoping for Berube or Quenneville. Kings are looking very mediocre so far this season. Low goal numbers, bad goaltending, and after a garbage loss to the Sharks, I have no reason to expect the Kings to do anything significant this year. The top 6 barely is showing up. Kopi has only 10 shots on goal in 12 games, and Kempe and Byfield have been invisible. Dano and Moore haven't done much of anything. The Kings are losing to bad teams or winning by the skin of their teeth against mediocre teams. At this rate, I can see a whole new management and coaching staff coming in for next season. What are your thoughts? Thanks for your time, and keep up the good work. And again, that was from Frank in Burbank. And again, that email was sent before the win over Vegas. So I'm guessing Frank feels a little bit better after that performance. I know I do. But that said, that win is a win that they have to build off. As I said, they can't take a step back. And certainly they need to take care of business against the Blackhawks. But I would say, I think it's fair to say that Jim Hiller was the affordable choice. I don't know what they're paying him, but it's not the $5 million Todd McClellan was making, which was reportedly either the highest paid coach in the league or one of them. Not all of the coaches' contract information is released by all the teams, but of the teams that do release that, Todd McClellan was actually the highest paid coach in the league. I had said at the time, I also would have preferred to see the Kings look outside the organization to bring somebody in, but I understand why they went with Jim Hiller. I don't think it was lazy. Maybe it was convenient. And again, maybe it's fair to say he was affordable, but I understand there are pluses and minuses with him being hired. I understand the pluses, and I don't think it was an unreasonable hire. So I would say, as far as the Vegas win, I think that probably makes everybody feel a little bit better about things. Maybe Frank, you would agree with that. As far as what the team has done over the last couple of years to try and get better, obviously the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade didn't work. But again, that one particular player was not a player that I would have taken a chance on because of his history. But you can't say it wasn't an aggressive move. You can't say it wasn't a bold move by Rob Blake. It didn't work, and he's got to pay the price for that. That goes on his resume, and there's no taking it off. But again, I'd rather have my GM be more proactive than not. And that was a big swing, and it was a swing and a miss. Again, I didn't have a problem with the philosophy of it, but that one particular player, because of his track record, was not a player I would have taken a chance on and given a big contract to. Perhaps it's because of that swing and miss that the Kings didn't go out and try and get any kind of really big name players. This offseason, they made some, they made moves, but they weren't big splashy moves, to be sure. So as far as the future of Rob Blake, obviously that's very much up in the air, depending on what happens this season. He is under contract, or I should say his contract is up after this season. For Jim Hiller, he's in year one of a 3-year deal. Typically, when you bring in a new GM, typically you're going to let that GM hire his own coach. But obviously, it's very early at this point to speculate how things are going to play out. A lot depends on how well the Kings do or do not do this season. We got more emails coming up here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. We are very lucky to be living here in Southern California. We've got so many opportunities to go to live events, especially sports. You've got obviously the Kings, Lakers and Clippers, Chargers and Rams, USC, UCLA college football going on right now. But it's not just about sports. We have theater events, comedy shows, and concerts you can go to as well. But no matter what you enjoy, you need to do what I do, and that is use Gametime for all your ticket needs. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can get tickets to see the Kings against the Blackhawks for less than $50. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Again, it's download the app, LOCKEDONNHL, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, our next email comes from Jeremy. He is in Van Nuys, and he says, it was great meeting you at the home opener. It was great to meet you as well, Jeremy. He says, after seeing the past few games, there hasn't really been a line that has stood out offensively. Kopi and Kempe have been quiet, and Byfield's looking like a shell of himself. I really like the line Jim Hiller started against Buffalo with Ferrier, Kopi, and Kempe. Laffy is putting in a lot of work this season, and I feel Hiller should stick with the same lines for a few games to see if chemistry is there rather than switching players around every game or two. Is there a particular line that you like seeing on the ice so far? And again, that was from Jeremy in Van Nuys. I do like LaFerriere on the top line. I'm okay with giving Alex Turcotte a shot as well. I think both those guys have played very, very well, regardless of where they've been. I'm okay with Quentin Byfield moving back to center after the move to wing didn't seem to spark him or that top line. I like seeing Akil Thomas in the line, but if I was going to pick one line this year that I really thought was the best line for the Kings all season, it would have been the Turcotte, LaFerriere, Fogle line. That was the third line for a little while, and that was the best line for the Kings. I don't mind the setup that the Kings have right now. We have a first here on Locked On LA Kings. We have a poem from Jim in Lakewood. Now, I looked it up. This is called an acrostic poem. An acrostic poem is a type of poetry where the first, last, or other letters in a line spell out a particular word or phrase. The most common and simple form of an acrostic poem is where the first letter of each line spells out a word or phrase. And that is what Jim has decided to do. And Jim's word is Darcy, in reference to Darcy Kuemper, a tribute to the Kings goaltender. So here we go. D is for dialed into the release of every shot. A, angles are very crisp. R, ready to rob guys all night. C, collecting shots that would have been goals. And Y, yearning to stop every puck. Darcy. Darcy. Okay. Well, I should say that I know Jim a little bit. He is a rec league goalie, so maybe that explains things. Goaltenders can be a bit of a different breed. And I know that Jim has his artistic side. He's a piano player as well. He's a pianist. Uh, hey, it's a little outside the box, but there you go. A poem from Jim in Lakewood, an acrostic poem, Darcy. Our next email comes from Alan. He is a diehard Kings fan and Dodgers fan, he says, from Sonoma, up there in wine country. He says, hey, Eddie, absolutely love the podcast. Thank you very much. My Friday mailbag question is, who is the one big offensive name out there that would actually be available as a free agent that you would love to see the Kings add with the young core of players and the veteran core, like Kempe and Fiala? That would actually be a game-changing type of player. So Alan is already looking ahead to see who could be a big name player the Kings could add. Of course, the Kings are up to the salary cap, so adding a player is not going to be easy from that regard. Somebody would have to go out the other way, or players would have to be sent to the minors, put on waivers. But you asked the question, I will answer. As far as, it is hard to kind of answer at this point because we don't know who exactly is going to be a buyer and who's going to be a seller. But I think to answer that question, you have to start with who are the big names or the names of note that are going to be unrestricted free agents after this season. Players that teams, if they're not playing well, would be looking to unload for some assets. Certainly, if you're looking at the big names, it would be guys like Mitch Marner in Toronto and Mikko Rantanen in Colorado. I don't see those guys going anywhere. They're very good players, and they will be re-signed by their teams. So realistically, you would look at maybe some older veteran players and players that are on teams that you could see those teams probably being sellers later in the year. So a couple names. Claude Giroux of the Ottawa Senators, veteran guy, still has something left in the tank, but he's going to be a UFA after this season, and I could see Ottawa not being in a playoff spot and looking to unload him for some assets and keep rebuilding. Patrick Kane in Detroit would be another guy. Obviously a player who is accustomed to being in the postseason, has scored some big goals in some big games, won Stanley Cups. He's winding down his career, so looking maybe to get another shot at a cup somewhere. If the Kings were in playoff contention, maybe, and certainly if Detroit was out of it, they'd be looking to move him somewhere. Brock Nelson of the New York Islanders, another guy who's a UFA at the end of the year, veteran guy who could be valuable to a team. And the Islanders, you could probably pretty easily see them not being in the playoff picture and looking to be sellers at the trade deadline. So again, kind of hard to say at this point, not knowing exactly what the picture looks like as far as the buyers and the sellers. But a couple of names you asked, I'll give you a couple of names of players that we probably know and heard of. Certainly Patrick Kane we're well familiar with when the Blackhawks and Kings were going at it. So there are a few names to keep in mind as the season goes along. A couple more emails to get to. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on college football. USC is a 2.5-point favorite at Washington, the over-under 55.5. UCLA is a 6.5-point underdog at Nebraska, over-under of 39.5. How about the NFL? Chargers are a 1.5-point favorite in Cleveland against the Browns. The Rams are also a 1.5-point favorite on the road against the Seahawks. Join FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, our next email comes from Gary. He's in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and he says he's checking in for the first time this season. He says, this month I am celebrating my 50th year as a Kings fan. Wow, awesome. He says, Kings Islanders, November 22nd, 1974 was the first game I attended as a kid. I couldn't find the program from that game, so I attached photos of a Goal magazine from a Kings Toronto game from 1981. You might recognize number 26 on the Toronto roster from that game. And I did check that out, and number 26 was former Kings head coach Barry Melrose. He says, now on to my comments. Two players I want to focus on. Kevin Fiala has been somewhat of an enigma for me so far this season. He has looked lost at times on the ice. I'm wondering if the benching and chat with Hiller might pull him out of whatever funk he has been in. He looked a little better against Vegas, in my opinion. As for Brandt Clark, I think Clark is going to be a high-reward, high-risk player for a while as he matures. In the Vegas game alone, he made the amazing spin move pass to Kopitar for a goal. In another play, he was caught leaving the zone too early as Edmondson coughed up the puck, and the Kings and Clark left his man all alone in front of the net. I believe the Kings are going to take about 30 games before we know the type of team they are. A lot of young players infused into the lineup and a new system. Thanks for all you do. I'm an everydayer, whether it's listening to the show on the podcast or watching on YouTube. Very nice. He says, P.S. I would love to meet up with Harry in Spokane, the other Coeur d'Alene Kings fan. If you want to pass along the info to him, we could meet up at a Spokane Chiefs hockey game. Well, first of all, I would just say, Gary, congratulations on 50 years as a Kings fan. That's awesome. I do totally agree with you about Kevin Fiala. I'm optimistic that this latest benching and subsequent suspension, although they weren't related, is going to certainly get his attention and get him going. And as far as Brandt Clark, I agree as well. He's going to make some mistakes. He's also going to make some highlight reel plays. And in the end, I think by the end of the season, I think we're going to see a pretty good NHL defenseman going forward as well. And I am more than happy to be any kind of a go-between for LA Kings fans to meet up. So yes, I would be more than happy to pass along any information that you would like to any other Kings fans in your area. Our last email comes from Ed in Brea. And he says, I did not get to see you at the last Kings game. I had my Steelers hat ready to go. However, I forgot to message you since I was watching the Dodgers game inside the arena. Now, if you don't remember, Ed is a Chargers fan like my wife, and he bet me on the Chargers-Steelers game earlier this year. I'm a Steelers fan. That he said the Chargers were going to win. And obviously I said the Steelers are going to win. And he said if the Steelers win, he would wear a Steelers hat to Chargers night at the Kings game. Now, he claims he had a Steelers hat ready to go, but he didn't. What do they say? No picture, no proof. I mean, I didn't see him wearing the hat, and he didn't take a picture of him wearing the hat. So as far as I'm concerned, sorry, Ed, you're not off the hook. You still have to wear a Steelers hat at a Kings game, and I have to see visual evidence of this. So you have not fulfilled your bet at this point. To the rest of Ed's email, he says, Kings are inconsistent despite dominating Vegas. The last game versus San Jose was unacceptable. To me, it shows why I fear the Kings are going to miss the playoffs. Kuemper, to me, needs to be healthy if the Kings want to make the playoffs. Clearly the number one. Hopefully he plays at least 55 games and maybe gets 29 to 30 wins. The Ottawa game inflated his stats. However, it shows that our goalies need a good team in front of them to help them get wins. And that was from Ed in Brea. I get the reaction to the Sharks game because I had that same reaction, but I also think you have to react to the Vegas game, to the Vegas win. I know everyone loves to react negatively, but it seems like, Ed, that you're saying that Sharks loss shows why they're not going to make the playoffs. Well, I would counter by saying, well, the Vegas win shows that why they are going to make the playoffs. We'll see. Obviously, a lot of season to go. But I think, it's certainly those two games showed the dichotomy of Kings teams we can see, and they did it one night after the other. So probably the truth is somewhere in between, I would say. You talked about the Kings, Darcy Kuemper needing the team to play well in front of him. I would say that's true about every goalie in the NHL. There's no goalie, even somebody amazing like Igor Shesterkin that's just going to be able to save every puck without his teammates helping him out in front of him. It's kind of like a quarterback with an offensive line, right? No matter how good you are as a quarterback, if you don't have time to throw the ball, you're not going to do anything. For a goaltender, no matter how good you are, if your defense and the teammate in front of you, you let players get into the high danger areas. NHL players are so skilled. You give them time and space, they're going to pick a corner. And it doesn't matter how good you are as a goalie, you're not going to be able to stop those shots because most players in the league nowadays are that good. So you got to cut down the time and space, and that you have to get that from your teammates. So I don't disagree with your point, but like I said, I think that's probably true of most goalies in the NHL. Don't forget, Kings fans, Kings Blackhawks, 1 p.m. LA time on Saturday. Game will be televised on the FanDuel Sports Network, formerly Ballet Sports West, and you can hear it on the 710 ESPN app. I will be out at the game, Blackhawks Kings. I'll be out there at Crypto, and if anybody wants to meet up, feel free to reach out with an email or on social media. I'd be happy to do that. For you everydayers, coming up a busy week for the LA Kings next week. They've got 3 games in 4 days during the week. Monday show will recap the Kings Blackhawks game and preview that night's game against the Predators in Nashville. Tuesday we'll recap that game and preview the next night's game in Minnesota. So back-to-back games on the road coming up for the Kings. Wednesday we'll recap the Kings Wild game. Thursday we'll preview the Kings Canucks game that night, and then Friday we'll recap that game and have another Kings fan feedback show. So lots of games coming up for the LA Kings to talk about and to recap and to comment on coming up next week. Hope you join us all week long. Now, if you want to get an email in at any point for anything, it could be the feed for the feedback show or anything else. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube as well. Also love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings go.